The universe operates on principles we understand: physics, chemistry, the fundamental laws of cause and effect. Matter behaves predictably. Energy follows rules. Even the most exotic phenomena in the cosmos, from quantum singularities to subspace anomalies, can eventually be catalogued, measured, and filed away in a Starfleet database. Science is the Federation's religion, and reason is its scripture. But what happens when something appears that defies every sensor, every theory, every rational explanation? What happens when the wrong man falls through the right crack in the universe, and lands in the middle of the deadliest war the Alpha Quadrant has ever seen? If you want to see more characters enter the Star Trek universe, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. Live long and prosper. The Badlands were already trying to kill the USS Defiant when the rift opened. Plasma storms churned across the view screen in curtains of orange and red, beautiful and lethal in equal measure, the kind of scenery that made Starfleet pilots check their insurance. Lieutenant Nog had both hands on the con, jaw clenched, reading the storm patterns with the focused desperation of someone who knew exactly how fast this ship could die out here. Behind him, Captain Benjamin Sisko stood at the center of the bridge with his arms folded, watching the sensors with the particular stillness of a man who had learned to make peace with danger. They were running. Not retreating. Sisko never retreated, but running, which was a different thing entirely when you were outnumbered 3-1 by Jem'Hadar attack ships and the Defiant had already taken 2 direct hits to the port nacelle. The Dominion War had been grinding the Federation down for months now. Every engagement felt like paying for the same ground twice. Every victory came with a butcher's bill attached. 2 Jem'Hadar still on our tail, Worf reported from Tactical. His voice carrying the controlled fury of a Klingon who deeply wanted to turn around and fight. They are maintaining pursuit into the plasma fields. Brave or stupid, Sisko said. With Jem'Hadar, the distinction is irrelevant. The Defiant lurched hard as a plasma tendril scraped the shields. Sparks cascaded from an overhead conduit. Ensign Gordimer at operations was already rerouting, fingers moving fast, not looking up. It was Gordimer who saw it first. Captain. His voice had a strange quality to it. Not fear exactly. Something closer to confusion wearing fear's clothes. I'm reading. I don't know what I'm reading. There's an energy signature in grid 774 that doesn't match any known phenomenon. It's not plasma. It's not a warp signature. It's not. On screen. The storm shifted. And in a scene between 2 plasma columns, the fabric of space did something space was not supposed to do. It folded. It creased like old paper, and through the crease came light that had no business being that color, white gold and wrong, pulsing at a frequency that made the bridge crew's eyes water. The rift was maybe 4 meters across. It existed for 11 seconds. Then it collapsed. And something fell out of it. Biological reading, Gordimer said, genuinely incredulous now. Sir, I have a biological reading. Single humanoid. Approximately 200 meters off the port bow, inside the plasma field. Sisko was at the sensors before anyone else moved. He looked at the readout for a long moment. Then he looked at Worf. He's alive. Worf checked his own panel, double-checked it, and had the expression of a Klingon deeply offended by what physics was telling him. Somehow. Yes. No environmental suit. No vessel. No explanation. A single living being, floating in the middle of a plasma storm that should have atomized anything organic in seconds, and the biosigns were not just present. They were strong. Steady heart rate. Normal, no. Elevated, body temperature. Brainwave activity indicating consciousness. Nog, Sisko said. Get us close enough for transporter lock. Captain, the plasma interference. I know. Do it anyway. What the transporter chief pulled out of the Badlands 30 seconds later materialized on the pad in a crouch, one knee down, both fists planted against the deck. He was short. Stocky. Built like something compressed rather than grown. Dense muscle packed into a compact frame that radiated threat the way a warp core radiated heat. His clothing was in shreds, burnt and torn, soaked through with blood that was already drying. His hair was wild, his face weathered and hard, cut with lines that spoke of a life measured in violence rather than years. He raised his head slowly. His eyes were brown and ancient and utterly, completely furious. Sisko had faced Jem'Hadar warriors, Cardassian commanders, the Borg, and once, memorably, AQ. He had learned to read danger the way other men read text. And what he read in this man's eyes in that first moment was not confusion, not fear, not the disorientation of dimensional displacement. It was the flat, patient, absolute readiness of something that had survived everything the universe had ever thrown at it, and was fully prepared to survive whatever came next. "Where," the man said, his voice a low rasp like gravel in a tin drum, "am I?" Sisko studied him for exactly 1 second. "You're aboard the USS Defiant," he said. "And I'm going to need you to stay very calm." The man looked down at his own hands. The cuts across his knuckles, deep ones, the kind that should have needed stitching, were closing. Visibly. In real time. The torn skin pulling itself back together with quiet biological efficiency. He looked back up at Sisko. "Calm," he said, "ain't really my thing." The Defiance brig was not designed for comfort. It was designed for containment, a small, functional space behind a force field emitter that could hold most known threats in the Alpha Quadrant. Most. The force field hummed at standard setting, casting a faint blue light across the cell's single bench, where the stranger sat with his elbows on his knees and the particular stillness of someone who was not resting but waiting. Sisko stood on the other side of the field with his arms folded. He had sent the security team away. Whatever this situation was, it did not feel like a security team situation. It felt like a conversation. "You want to tell me your name?" Sisko said. The man looked up. "Logan." "Just Logan?" "That's enough." Sisko accepted that with a small nod. "I'm Captain Benjamin Sisko. You're aboard a Federation starship currently operating in a region called the Badlands, in the middle of an active war zone. You came through a dimensional rift that our sensors are still trying to classify." He paused. "You were floating in a plasma storm without a suit. You should be dead." Logan said nothing. "Your wounds are healing," Sisko continued. "I watched it happen on the transporter pad. That's not something human biology does. I'm not exactly standard issue. I'm beginning to understand that." Sisko pulled a chair from the corridor, turned it around, and sat on it backwards, forearms resting on the back. It was a deliberate gesture, casual, non-threatening, the posture of a man who wanted a real conversation rather than an interrogation. He had learned that trick years ago, long before DS9, long before any of this. "Where are you from, Logan? And I don't mean a city or a planet. I mean, what universe?" Logan studied him with those ancient eyes. He had the look of a man running rapid internal calculations, threat assessment, escape routes, trustworthiness ratings, doing it all quietly behind an expression that gave away nothing. Finally he said, "Earth." "But not your Earth. Different timeline. Different dimension. Something like that." A pause. "There are mutants where I come from. People born with abilities. I'm one of them. My body heals. Fast. Faster than anything your doctors are probably gonna believe." He held up one hand. The last of the knuckle wounds had completely vanished. Clean, unmarked skin. "And I've got these." 3 blades extended from between his knuckles with a sound like knives clearing sheaths. A soft, metallic shink that was somehow more unsettling for how quiet it was. They caught the brig's lighting, and Sisko saw immediately that they were not steel. The color was wrong. Too bright. Too hard-looking. Adamantium, Logan said. Bonded to my skeleton. Every bone. He retracted them. I didn't ask for it. Sisko was quiet for a moment, processing. Behind him, he could hear the Defiance engines cycling through repairs, the distant sound of Worf barking instructions at a damage control team. The Jem'Hadar pursuit ships had broken off at the edge of the Badlands, even they had limits, but that wouldn't last. It never lasted. The rift, Sisko said. Do you know what caused it? I was in a fight, Logan said simply. Aircraft went down. There was an explosion. Something big, something that wasn't standard ordnance. Then I was in that storm. He looked at his hands again, briefly. I've been pulled through worse. Sisko stood, replaced the chair, and looked at Logan for a long moment with the expression he used when making decisions that had no clean answer. He had a war to fight. He had a damaged ship, 2 dead crew members from the engagement that had driven them into the Badlands, and a rendezvous with a Klingon battle group in 14 hours. He did not have time for the impossible. And yet. I'm going to lower the force field, Sisko said. I want to be clear about what that means. This ship has a crew of 47 people. We are in a war zone. If you do anything that threatens this crew or this vessel, I will respond accordingly. Are we understood? Logan looked at him. Something shifted in those old eyes, not warmth exactly, but the recognition of a man who spoke plainly and meant what he said. Logan respected that. Sisko could see it happen in real time. Understood, Logan said. The force field dropped with a low tone. Logan stood, unhurried, deliberate, and stepped out of the cell. He was nearly a head shorter than Sisko but somehow took up the same amount of space. He looked down the corridor, reading the ship with his senses, his nostrils flaring almost imperceptibly. Something wrong? Sisko asked. You've got wounded, Logan said. Smells like 3, maybe 4. And your ship is running on about 70%. He glanced at Sisko. You lost people in whatever fight you were running from. It was not a question. Sisko's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. 2 crew members. Yes. Logan said nothing for a moment. Then, quietly, who are you fighting? Sisko began walking toward the bridge, and Logan fell into step beside him without being asked, the instinctive movement of a soldier who understood that standing still in a combat environment was its own kind of risk. An empire from the Gamma Quadrant, Sisko said. Called the Dominion. They're trying to conquer the Alpha Quadrant. They have an army of genetically engineered soldiers called the Jem'Hadar, no fear, no hesitation, no mercy. Their leaders are shapeshifters. They could be anyone. He looked sideways at Logan. Anyone at all. Logan absorbed this without visible reaction. Then he said, shapeshifters. Yes. How do you tell them apart from regular people? That, Sisko said, with the weight of a man who had lost sleep over exactly that question for the better part of 2 years, is the question that's been keeping me up at night. Logan's expression didn't change. But something behind his eyes went very quiet and very focused. I might be able to help with that, he said. Dr. Julian Bashir had seen extraordinary things in his career. He had treated Cardassian war criminals, patched together Jem'Hadar physiology under fire, and once spent 6 hours keeping a Horta alive with a modified dermal regenerator and considerable improvisation. He considered himself difficult to surprise. Logan was surprising him. Hold still, Bashir said, for the 3rd time. I am holding still. You're watching my hands like you're planning to remove them. Old habit. The infirmary was quiet except for the soft chirp of medical instruments and the distant hum of the Defiance engines settling into repair rhythms. Logan sat on the bio bed with the rigid tolerance of someone who deeply disliked being examined but had made a pragmatic decision to allow it. His shirt was off. The last of the plasma burned scarring across his left shoulder, damage that should have required weeks of dermal regeneration, had reduced itself to a faint pink trace while Bashir watched. Now even that was fading. Bashir ran the medical tricorder across Logan's torso for the fourth pass and stared at the readings the way a man stares at a warp equation that keeps producing the wrong answer. Your cellular regeneration rate is. He paused. Recalibrated. Reran the scan. It's approximately 40 times faster than baseline human. Maybe more. The instrument may not be calibrated for readings at this end of the scale. He looked up. Does it hurt? The healing? Logan considered this with genuine thoughtfulness, as though the question had never occurred to him. Sometimes. Depends on the damage. And the adamantium skeleton, the bonding process. I don't remember it, Logan said flatly. The tone closed that particular door with the finality of a pressure seal engaging. Bashir accepted that and moved on. He pulled up the scan results on the wall display, and both men looked at them together. The internal skeletal structure rendered in soft blue light, every bone sheathed in a metallic coating that showed up on sensors as a material Bashir had never encountered in biological tissue. The claws were visible in their retracted position, 3 per hand, seated in channels that ran along the forearm structure with an anatomical precision that suggested either extraordinary surgery or something considerably darker. The weight alone, Bashir murmured, half to himself. A full adamantium skeleton would add, conservatively, 30 kilograms to your body mass. Your musculature has compensated entirely. Your cardiovascular system is running at a sustained output that would indicate a resting state equivalent to a trained humanoid athlete at peak exertion. He looked at Logan with the expression of a doctor who had just found something genuinely extraordinary and couldn't decide whether to be fascinated or alarmed. How old are you? A long pause. Old, Logan said. Approximately. Over 150 years. Probably more. He said it the way other people said they were 34. Just a number. Barely worth mentioning. Bashir set the tricorder down slowly. Your telomeres show virtually no degradation. Your cellular aging process appears to have essentially. He searched for the word. Stalled. You've been alive for a century and a half and your body reads as a man in his physical prime. He shook his head. The implications for Federation medicine alone. I'm not a lab specimen, Logan said. Not aggressively. Just clearly. No, Bashir agreed immediately. No, of course not. I apologize. He meant it. One of Bashir's genuine qualities, enhanced genetics notwithstanding, was that his bedside manner was instinctively respectful. I want to understand what I'm looking at. Medically. In case you're injured and I need to treat you. Logan looked at him for a moment. Then, with the slight relaxation of a man recalibrating a threat assessment downward, fair enough. Is there anything that limits the healing factor? Anything I should know about? Enough damage fast enough can overwhelm it temporarily. If you hit me with something big enough, I go down. I get back up, but I go down. He paused. Decapitation would probably do it. Probably. Bashir absorbed the word probably with visible effort. What about your senses? The enhanced smell, how precise is it? Precise enough that I can tell you've got Ractigino in the replicator queue, that Chief O'Brien is running a plasma welder 2 decks up, and that whoever was in this room before me was scared. He watched Bashir's reaction. Scared people have a specific chemical signature. Adrenaline, cortisol. It's distinct. And shapeshifters? Bashir asked. The question came out carefully, the way careful questions do when the stakes behind them are very high. The founders, the changelings. Could you detect one? If one was posing as a member of this crew? The infirmary was very quiet for a moment. Depends, Logan said. A shapeshifter mimicking a human would have to replicate the biochemical signature too, the hormones, the skin chemistry, all of it. Most shapeshifters I've ever encountered can fake the visual. The smell is harder. He looked at Bashir steadily. I'd need a baseline. Spend some time with the crew, learn what everyone smells like when they're normal. Then if something's off, he tapped the side of his nose. I'd know. Bashir stared at him. Then he picked up a PADD and began writing very quickly. I need to get you in front of Captain Sisko, he said. And then I need to send a very long subspace message to Starfleet Medical, because what you represent for changeling detection alone could. Doc, Logan said. Bashir stopped typing. One thing at a time, Logan said. What's the immediate threat? Bashir set the PADD down. Outside the infirmary viewport, the Badlands plasma storms rolled in their eternal violent silence. Somewhere beyond them, the Dominion was regrouping. The immediate threat, Bashir said quietly, is everything. The briefing room on the Defiant was not built for long meetings. It was a functional space, a table, chairs, a wall display, the bare minimum required for a warship that valued efficiency over comfort. Sisko stood at the head of the table. Worf sat to his left with the posture of a Klingon who had already formed an opinion and was waiting for the conversation to confirm it. Bashir had his PADD. O'Brien had a coffee and the expression of a man who had stopped being surprised by anything approximately 18 months ago. Logan sat at the far end of the table and said nothing, reading the room with those quiet, ancient eyes. Sisko pulled up the tactical display. Our rendezvous with General Martok's battle group is in 11 hours. We have a damaged port nacelle, reduced shield capacity, and a crew running on short sleep and shorter rations. He looked around the table. We also have a new variable. He nodded toward Logan. I want assessments. Worf went first, because Worf always went first when combat was on the table. His biology is confirmed extraordinary. His combat experience appears genuine and extensive. He represents a significant tactical asset. A pause that contained a universe of Klingon qualification. However, he is not Starfleet. He has no understanding of our rules of engagement, our command structure, or our mission priorities. Deploying him without clear parameters would be irresponsible. Noted, Sisko said. Doctor? Bashir straightened. Medically, he's unlike anything in Federation records. The healing factor is real and extraordinary. More relevantly for our current situation, he glanced at Logan with something approaching excitement that professional caution was working hard to suppress. His olfactory sensitivity is sufficient to potentially detect changeling infiltrators. The biochemical mimicry required for a founder to pass as a specific individual may not extend to full hormonal and chemical replication. Logan could function as a living detection system. The table went quiet in a specific way. The way it goes quiet when something important has just been said. O'Brien leaned forward. You're saying he could smell a shapeshifter. I'm saying it's a genuine possibility worth investigating, Bashir said carefully. Sisko looked at Logan. Your thoughts on all of this? Logan had been listening to people discuss him as though he wasn't in the room with the patience of a man who had sat through similar conversations many times before and knew that the fastest way through them was to let them finish. Now he leaned forward, forearms on the table. I'll be straight with you, he said. I don't know your rules. I don't know your war beyond what you've told me in the last 2 hours. I don't know if I can get home or how long I'm stuck here. He looked at Sisko directly. What I do know is this. You're fighting an enemy that can look like anyone. That wears your friends' faces. That turns your trust into a weapon against you. Something moved behind his eyes, old recognition, personal and deep. I know what that's like. And I know what it takes to fight it. What does it take? Sisko asked. Willingness to do things that make you uncomfortable, Logan said simply. The silence that followed had texture. Worf's expression was unreadable, which for Worf meant he was actively suppressing agreement. O'Brien studied his coffee. Bashir looked at the table. Sisko studied Logan for a long moment. This is a Starfleet vessel. We operate under Starfleet regulations and the laws of the Federation. That means rules of engagement, treatment of prisoners, proportional response. Those aren't suggestions. They're the foundation of what we're fighting to protect. He kept his voice level and hard in equal measure. If you're on this ship, you operate within those parameters. I need to know you understand that. Logan met his eyes. I understand it. Understanding it and accepting it are different things. Yeah. Logan said. They are. He was quiet for a moment. I've worked with organizations that had rules before. Some of those rules were worth following. Some of them got people killed. He held Sisko's gaze. I'll follow yours until they get someone killed. Then we're going to have a conversation. It was not the answer Sisko wanted. It was, however, an honest one. And Sisko, who had spent 2 years watching the Federation contort its own principles under wartime pressure, found that honesty difficult to dismiss. Fair enough, he said quietly. For now. The red alert klaxon hit like a physical thing. 3 Jem'Hadar warships, Worf announced, already moving toward the door. Dropping out of warp at grid 447. They found us. The briefing dissolved instantly into controlled chaos. Starfleet's particular brand of urgent professionalism, everyone moving fast and precisely toward their stations, no wasted motion, no panic. Logan was on his feet before anyone else, reading the shift in the room's energy with combat-honed instincts. O'Brien paused at the door and looked back at him. You might want to hold on to something. The Defiant hit evasive maneuvers before Logan reached the bridge, and the ship bucked hard enough to send him into a bulkhead. He hit it with one shoulder, absorbed the impact, and kept moving. Through the viewport at the end of the corridor he caught a brief glimpse of what was outside, the curved void of space, the distant angry glow of the Badlands edge, and 3 dark angular shapes closing fast, trailing the blue-white fire of Dominion weapons charging to full power. Logan watched them for exactly 1 second. Then he rolled his neck, heard it crack, and followed O'Brien toward the sound of the fight. The battle lasted 11 minutes. 11 minutes of the Defiant throwing itself through space with the controlled aggression of a ship that knew it was outgunned and had decided that speed and angle were better odds than a straight exchange. Sisko flew her like she was an extension of his own nervous system, hard rolls, sudden drops in the Z-axis, using the Badlands plasma tendrils as cover the way a street fighter uses furniture. The Jem'Hadar were precise and relentless, their attack patterns overlapping in the coordinated geometry of soldiers who had been bred for this and nothing else. Logan spent the battle braced in the corridor outside the bridge, watching through the viewport, learning. He had fought in wars. He had fought in the trenches of the First World War with mud in his lungs and artillery rewriting the landscape around him. He had fought in jungles, in deserts, in frozen mountain passes where the cold was its own enemy. He understood the grammar of combat, the rhythms of engagement and withdrawal, the geometry of fire and cover, the way a fight breathed. This was different. This was combat at scales and speeds that made conventional warfare feel like a fistfight in a closet. Weapons that moved at the speed of light. Shields that absorbed energy and redistributed it across hull geometry. The Jem'Hadar ships were not trying to destroy the Defiant through brute force alone, they were hurting it, pushing it toward a plasma column dense enough to strip shields in seconds. Logan saw it before Worf called it out. He pushed through the bridge door without asking. "They're pushing you left," he said. Sisko glanced back. "I know. The middle ship is the coordinator. The other two are following its targeting pattern. You take out the middle one, the other two lose their formation geometry." He had crossed to Worf's tactical display and was reading it with the quick functional literacy of a man who couldn't name the systems but understood the spatial relationships immediately. "There, that ship is half a second behind on every course correction. It's compensating for something. Engine damage, maybe. It's the weak point." Worf looked at the display, then at Sisko, with an expression that was the Klingon equivalent of reluctant acknowledgement. Sisko made the call in under 2 seconds. "Worf. The trailing ship. Full spread, pattern Delta." The Defiant rolled hard to starboard and the quantum torpedoes left the tubes in a tight grouping that the damaged Jem'Hadar vessel couldn't fully evade. Its shields buckled on the third impact. The formation broke. The remaining two ships recalculated, and in the 4 seconds of repositioning delay, the Defiant punched through the gap at full impulse and ran. They cleared the Badlands edge 17 minutes later with no pursuit. The bridge exhaled collectively. Not celebration. There was nothing to celebrate, 2 crew members still dead, the ship still damaged, but the specific relief of people who had just survived something that was trying very hard to kill them. Sisko turned and looked at Logan standing at the back of the bridge. "Good call," he said. Logan said nothing. He was already looking at the next problem. The rendezvous with Martok's battle group happened in deep space, 3 hours later, at coordinates that existed in Starfleet's databases as unremarkable empty quadrant. 6 Klingon birds of prey and 2 Vorcha-class attack cruisers decloaked around the Defiant with the theatrical timing that Klingon brought to most things. General Martok's face filled the view screen. Scarred, one-eyed, radiating the particular energy of a Klingon who was genuinely enjoying the war because it was the only context in which he felt completely alive. "Sisko," Martok said, in the tone of a man greeting a brother he expected to find dead. "You look terrible." "It's been a long day," Sisko said. "We have a situation I need to brief you on." Martok's single eye found Logan. Immediately, standing off to the side of the bridge with his arms folded, and stayed there with the focused attention of a predator identifying something it couldn't immediately classify. "Who is that?" Martok said. "That," Sisko said, "is a long story. I enjoy long stories." Martok leaned forward. "You. What is your name?" Logan looked at the view screen. "Logan. You were in the Badlands engagement. I reviewed the sensor logs my patrol ships collected from the perimeter." Martok's eye narrowed. "You advised the targeting solution that broke the Jem'Hadar formation. Somebody had to." There was a pause. Then Martok laughed, a deep, genuine sound that filled the bridge like something physical. "Sisko. Bring this man to my ship. I want to drink with him. General, we have a tactical briefing to conduct." "The briefing can wait 1 hour. This cannot." Martok's tone shifted from jovial to something more direct, more serious, the way Klingon moods could turn with startling speed. "I have been fighting Jem'Hadar for 2 years, Sisko. I know what a soldier looks like. That man over there," he pointed directly at Logan. "That is not a soldier. That is something older. Something that was made for this." A pause. "I want to know what it is." Logan looked at Sisko. Sisko looked at Logan. "Your call," Sisko said. Logan considered for a moment the practical calculation of a man assessing new allies in unfamiliar territory. The Klingon were warriors. Blunt, direct, honor-bound in ways that he could respect even if the specifics were foreign. They were not trying to manage him or contain him or run him through a regulatory framework. They were offering something simpler and older. Recognition. "Yeah," Logan said. "All right. Martok's flagship smelled like blood and metal and something fermented that Logan's nose catalogued as alcoholic without being able to name the specific compound. The great hull of the IKS Rotaran was lit in low amber, lined with weapons mounted on dark metal walls, populated by Klingon warriors who stopped what they were doing and watched Logan walk in with the alert stillness of people recalibrating a room's threat landscape. Logan walked through their attention without acknowledging it. He had walked into rooms like this before, rooms full of dangerous people deciding whether he was worth killing. The trick was never to perform confidence. Just to have it. Martok met him at the center of the hall with a cup of something dark and steaming that he pressed into Logan's hand without ceremony. Warnog, Martok said. Klingon ale, fermented from the bark of the Tangoth tree. It has ended the careers of several Federation diplomats. He watched Logan with that single eye. Drink. Logan drank. It hit the back of his throat like something between whiskey and a phaser set to stun, with an aftertaste that was almost aggressively biological. He swallowed it without flinching, set the cup down, and looked at Martok. Martok smiled. It was the smile of a man who had just received useful information. Sit, Martok said. They sat across from each other at a low table while Sisko conducted the actual tactical briefing with Martok's officers at the far end of the hall. Troop movements, supply lines, the Dominion's latest push toward Benzor. Important work. Logan let it happen in his peripheral awareness and focused on the man in front of him. You want to know what I am, Logan said. I want to know who you are, Martok corrected. What you are is visible. Enhanced strength, accelerated healing, weapons built into your body. He studied Logan with the appreciation of someone who understood weaponry at a fundamental level. A warrior designed by someone else's hand and then left to become his own man. I recognize this. He touched the scar that ran across his empty eye socket. The Dominion gave me this. They took my eye and gave me a prison cell and expected it to break me. Instead it clarified things considerably. A pause. What did they take from you? Logan was quiet for a moment. Around them the sounds of the ship, deep engine rhythms, the distant clang of maintenance work, warriors talking in Klingon too fast for the universal translator to fully track. Filled the silence comfortably. A lot of things, Logan said finally. My memory. Parts of my history. Pieces of myself I'm still finding. He looked at his hands, briefly. The people who did this to me, the adamantium, the procedure, they thought they were making a weapon. Something they could point and fire and put back in a drawer. And instead they made something that couldn't be put back in a drawer. He looked up. I've spent a long time being angry about that. Still am, some days. But anger's just fuel. The question is what you do with it. Martok regarded him with an expression that had moved past assessment into something that looked, on a Klingon face, almost like respect. In the Empire, we have a concept. A warrior who cannot be broken by what is done to him, who takes the damage and becomes stronger, not weaker, we call this TIQ, oi. The heart scar. He reached across the table and refilled Logan's cup without asking. You carry many such scars. Too many to count, Logan agreed. Good, Martok said simply. Unmarked warriors are untested warriors. 3 decks below, in a corridor that the Rotaran's internal sensors showed as empty, something was listening. It had been aboard the ship for 6 days, wearing the face of a Klingon weapons technician named Korath with sufficient precision to pass every visual inspection and most behavioral ones. The real Korath was in a cargo container on a Dominion relay station in the Almatha sector, alive. Because founders preferred their templates conscious and biochemically active for as long as possible. The copy had Koratha's walk, his voice, his specific pattern of complaint about replicator rations. It had his smell, or what the founder had calculated his smell to be, working from biological data gathered during a brief physical contact 6 days prior. It had not anticipated Logan. The founder processed what its surveillance had gathered with the cool efficiency of a species that had spent centuries as masters of infiltration. The biological readings it had managed to collect from the Rotaran's internal sensors were deeply troubling. The human, if human was even the correct classification, had sensory capabilities that fell outside every Federation or Klingon biological profile in Dominion intelligence files. The olfactory sensitivity in particular. The founder ran probability calculations. If this creature could detect biochemical inconsistencies, if its sensory resolution was fine enough to identify the gap between a real Klingon's hormonal signature and a founder's approximation of one, then its continued presence aboard any vessel the Dominion had infiltrated represented an existential operational risk. The conclusion was straightforward. Logan had to be removed before he spent enough time with the crew to establish baselines. The founder that was currently Korath moved carefully through the corridor toward the maintenance junction that provided access to life support controls for Deck 3. It did not intend to be subtle about what came next. Subtlety was for situations where discovery was not yet certain. Discovery, in this case, was approximately inevitable. Which meant the only remaining variable was timing. On the deck above, Logan paused mid-sentence. His nostrils flared once, almost imperceptibly. He turned his head slightly toward the floor. Martok noticed immediately. "What is it?" Logan was very still for a moment, reading something invisible. "You've got a problem on this ship," he said quietly. Martok was on his feet before Logan finished the sentence. "Explain," he said. The jovial warmth had vacated his face completely, replaced by something harder and older, the face of a general who had survived the Dominion's infiltration games long enough to know exactly what those words meant. "Something on this deck doesn't smell right," Logan said. He was already moving toward the door, following the thread of wrongness with the focused intensity of a hunting dog on a scent. "There's a biological signature that's close to Klingon but not quite there. Like a copy made from a description rather than the real thing. The hormonal markers are off, too uniform, too consistent. Real people's biochemistry fluctuates. This doesn't." Martok turned to his first officer across the hull. "Clag. Seal Deck 3. Full internal sensor sweep. Nobody moves without my direct authorization." Clag didn't ask questions. He was already at the comm panel. Sisko crossed the hall in 6 strides, reading the situation from Martok's posture alone. "Changeling?" "Possibly," Logan said. He was in the corridor now, moving at a pace that was deliberately unhurried, not because he wasn't urgent but because he understood that running told the quarry it had been detected. "It's below us. 1 deck down, moving toward, what's in that direction?" "Maintenance junction," Martok said, from directly behind him. "Life support access for Deck 3. The 3 of them moved. The founder had approximately 40 seconds before the ship's internal lockdown made its current form untenable. It ran the calculations with the cold precision of a species for which patience and rapid adaptation were equally natural. The life support junction offered options: atmosphere composition adjustments, temperature variance, targeted environmental interference that could create enough chaos to mask an extraction. Not elegant, but functional. It was reaching for the junction panel when it smelled something. Which was wrong. Founders didn't experience smell as a primary sense. But the thing coming down the corridor toward it was producing a biochemical output so intense, so specifically predatory, that even a changeling's approximated nervous system registered it as warning. Logan came around the corner at a pace that was not quite running and not quite walking, something in between that covered ground very fast while staying low and centered. His eyes found the figure at the junction panel immediately, a Klingon-shaped thing in a technician's uniform, one hand on the panel, one hand that was already beginning to lose its definition at the edges, the fingers blurring as the founder beneath the disguise began instinctively to shift. "Don't," Logan said. The founder completed the calculation that it had been running since the moment this creature had arrived. Physical confrontation with something that healed faster than damage could be inflicted was tactically irrational. Capture was preferable to destruction for intelligence purposes. It let the disguise collapse. What stood in the corridor was briefly nothing. A column of amber liquid holding a vaguely humanoid shape, features smoothed away, the real face of the Dominion's most dangerous weapon. Then it reformed, not into Korath but into something else. Something calculated. It wore Sisko's face. Logan stopped moving for exactly 1 second, not from confusion but from the instinctive pause of a man recognizing a tactic he had seen before. Use the familiar face. Make the opponent hesitate. Create a half-second of psychological interference. He didn't look back at the real Sisko behind him. Nice try, he said, and closed the distance. The Founder moved fast. Changelings in direct confrontation were not passive, and this one shifted its arm into something dense and impact-resistant. As it swung, the blow caught Logan across the shoulder with enough force to drive a normal man into the bulkhead hard enough to matter. Logan took it, rolled with it, came back around, and drove 3 adamantium claws into the mass of the Founder's torso. The effect was not what it would have been against organic tissue. The claws passed through the changeling's body without the resistance of solid matter. The Founder simply flowed around them, reforming, the punctures closing like holes in water. But it couldn't maintain the Sisko face while doing it, and it couldn't generate the same force in its strikes while simultaneously rebuilding its structure. Logan had fought enough shapeshifters in his own universe to understand the basic principle: they could be many things but not all things simultaneously. He kept the pressure on. Kept the claws moving. Not trying to injure, trying to occupy. Every second the Founder spent rebuilding itself around his strikes was a second it wasn't doing anything else. Behind him he heard Sisko's voice, the real one, with its specific frequency and the particular authority that the Founder's copy had been microseconds away from capturing convincingly. Martok. Containment field. Now. The corridor lit up with the blue shimmer of a force field dropping into place around the junction area. The Founder hit the field boundary and recoiled. Changelings could pass through most physical barriers but not active energy containment above a certain threshold. It compressed itself, testing the field geometry, calculating. Logan stepped back. Let the field do its work. He retracted his claws and looked at the thing contained in the blue light, this ambassador of a species that had decided the Alpha Quadrant needed to be owned. How long has it been on your ship? He asked Martok. Martok's voice was very controlled in the way that Klingon voices got when the emotion underneath was too large for the usual channels. Sensor logs will tell us. The technician it replaced, Korath, has been aboard 6 days. 6 days. Logan thought about what 6 days of changeling access to a Klingon battle group's tactical systems meant. The supply routes it had observed. The command codes it might have transmitted. The conversations it had been present for. You need to sweep every ship in this group, Logan said. Every one. Right now. Sisko was already on the comm to the Defiant. The Founder in the containment field said nothing. It had no face at the moment, just that smooth amber surface, patient and unreadable. But Logan stood close to the field and looked at it directly, and after a moment he said, quietly, so only it could hear. I know you've got more of them out there. And I'm going to find every single one. The Founder's surface rippled almost imperceptibly. Logan took that as confirmation. The sweep took 4 hours. Logan moved through every ship in Martok's battle group methodically, transported from vessel to vessel with a Klingon security escort that started out as containment and gradually became something closer to professional respect. The process was simple in concept and exhausting in execution: walk the corridors, read the air, flag anything that registered as biochemically inconsistent. Let the Klingon security teams handle the containment. Move to the next deck. He found 2 more Founders. The first was on the IKS Vortek, wearing the face of a junior communications officer named Mechtel who had been replaced 11 days prior. Logan identified it in the mess hall, midway through a conversation with 3 other warriors, its hormonal signature running with the same uncanny flatness he had detected on the Rotaran. Real people's biochemistry told stories, shifted with mood and hunger and fatigue, and this one's was reading like a straight line on a medical monitor. The Klingon had it in a containment field within 90 seconds. The second was harder. It was on the IKS Peaktar, and it had been there for 18 days, long enough to learn its host thoroughly, long enough to have corrected some of the biochemical inconsistencies that made the others detectable. Logan walked past it twice in the corridor before something nagged at him, a wrongness just below the threshold of certainty, like a word on the tip of the tongue. He went back. Stood close. Made it uncomfortable enough that its concentration fractured slightly. The smell shifted. Just barely. Just for a second. But enough. 3 founders removed from the battle group's command structure in 4 hours. The Klingon crews reacted with a specific kind of fury that was different from battlefield anger. This was the rage of people who had been sleeping next to enemies, sharing meals with them, trusting them with their lives. Several warriors had to be physically restrained from tearing the containment fields open. Martok let them shout for exactly as long as was necessary, then silenced the room with a single word in Klingon that the universal translator rendered as roughly equivalent to enough. Sisko watched all of it from the Defiance bridge via viewscreen, coordinating with Starfleet Command on encrypted channels, sending the intelligence implications up the chain with the urgent efficiency of someone who understood exactly how significant this capability was. Bashir was already drafting a formal medical assessment. Admiral Ross's office had responded within 20 minutes of the first report, a response time that told Sisko everything he needed to know about how seriously Starfleet was taking what Logan could do. When Logan returned to the Defiant, he looked tired in a way that was not physical. His healing factor handled physical exhaustion with brutal efficiency. What it couldn't process was the specific weight of what he had spent 4 hours doing, moving through spaces full of people and cataloging them, sorting them, deciding which ones were real. He had done things like this before, in his own world. It never felt clean. Sisko met him in the transporter room. "Starfleet Command wants to talk to you," Sisko said. Logan looked at him. "Of course they do. Admiral Ross is proposing that you be formally attached to the war effort in an advisory capacity. They want to deploy you to Deep Space Nine and potentially to the front lines, use your detection capabilities systematically across Federation and Allied installations." "As a tool," Logan said. Sisko was quiet for a moment. "As an asset. There's a distinction. There's less of one than you think." Logan leaned against the corridor wall, arms folded. "I've been an asset before. For people who had good intentions and bad judgment. It ends the same way, you get used up and then you get managed, and when you stop being useful they find a reason to make you someone else's problem." He looked at Sisko directly. "No offense to your Admiral Ross." "None taken on his behalf," Sisko said dryly. "For what it's worth, I'm not asking you to sign anything. I'm telling you what's been proposed so you can make an informed decision." He paused. "But I want you to understand what's at stake. The Dominion has been using changeling infiltration to destabilize the Alpha Quadrant for years. They've replaced Starfleet admirals, Klingon generals, Romulan senators. Every installation we can sweep and clear is one less vulnerability in a war we are currently not winning." Logan absorbed this. "How many people," he said, "have died because of infiltrators you didn't catch?" The question landed quietly and stayed there. Sisko's jaw tightened. "More than I'm comfortable with." Logan was silent for a long moment, looking at something that wasn't in the corridor. In his own world he had made this calculation many times. The line between using his abilities in service of something larger and allowing himself to be deployed like a weapon by people who understood the utility but not the cost. He had crossed that line before, in both directions, and he knew exactly what it felt like from each side. "I'll go to your Deep Space Nine," he said finally. "I'll do the sweeps. I'll work with your people." He pushed off the wall. "But I do it my way. I don't answer to Ross or anyone else above your pay grade. I report to you. You tell me where to go and what the objective is, and I handle the execution without a Starfleet committee second-guessing every decision." Sisko studied him. "That's an unconventional arrangement." "Yeah, well," Logan said. "I'm an unconventional guy." Sisko was quiet for a moment, running the calculation that captains ran when choosing between clean procedure and necessary pragmatism. It was a calculation the Dominion War had forced on him more times than he could count. "Agreed," he said. "But Logan," he waited until Logan met his eyes. "If your methods cross a line I can't defend, I'll tell you. Directly. And I'll expect you to hear it." Logan looked at him for a long moment. Then he nodded, once. "Fair enough," he said. Outside the viewport, the stars held their positions with indifferent permanence, and somewhere in the dark between them, the Dominion was already sending new orders to assets that hadn't been found yet. Deep Space Nine smelled like 100 civilizations compressed into a single structure. Logan noticed it the moment he stepped off the transport, the layered complexity of Bajoran incense and Ferengi food stalls and machine oil and recycled atmosphere and the specific metallic undertone of Cardassian engineering that no amount of Federation renovation had fully scrubbed from the station's bones. It was overwhelming in the way that cities were overwhelming, 1,000 individual signals competing for attention simultaneously, and he stood at the docking ring junction for a moment just breathing it in, cataloging, building the map his abilities required. Sisko had briefed him on the station during the 3-day journey from the Badlands. The crossroads of the quadrant. Bajoran sovereign territory under Federation administration. The wormhole to the Gamma Quadrant. The Dominion's highway into Alpha Quadrant space, sitting 12 kilometers off the bow like a loaded weapon with the safety removed. 50,000 people moving through the station on any given day. Merchants, refugees, Starfleet personnel, Bajoran militia, Klingon warriors, Cardassian observers, and everything in between. 50,000 people. Any one of whom could be a founder. Major Kira met them at the docking ring with the energy of someone who had been running on urgency for so long that urgency had become her resting state. She was compact and direct and looked at Logan with the frank assessment of a Bajoran resistance fighter evaluating an unknown variable, not hostile, not welcoming, purely analytical. "Major Neres Kira," Sisko said. "My first officer." Logan said. "I've read Sisko's report," Kira said. 3 founders pulled from Martok's battle group. She looked at him steadily. "Can you do the same here?" "Give me time and access," Logan said. "Yes. You'll have both." She turned and walked, and Logan fell into step beside her with Sisko on his other side, moving through the promenade with its organized chaos of commerce and movement and overlapping languages. "We have a situation that's developed in the last 48 hours that changes the timeline on this." "What kind of situation?" Sisko asked. "Intelligence from a Cardassian source, reliability rated high, indicates the Dominion is planning a major offensive push within 72 hours. Targeting the Calandra sector. If they break through there, they split the Federation supply lines to the entire Spinward front." Kira's voice was level with the particular flatness of someone delivering information they don't like. "We have reason to believe the offensive timing was coordinated with information provided by an infiltrator currently operating somewhere on this station or within the 7th Fleet's command structure." The promenade moved around them. A Bajoran child ran past chasing something small and mechanical. A Ferengi bartender, Quark, Logan would later learn, leaned out of his establishment's entrance and watched the 3 of them pass with the bright calculating eyes of someone who monetized information and was already assessing the new arrival's potential value. Logan filtered all of it and focused on what Kira had said. 72 hours. Possibly less. How many people in the 7th Fleet's command structure do I need to clear? 31 senior officers with access to the relevant tactical systems, Kira said. Where are they now? 22 are on the station. 9 are aboard ships currently docked at the outer pylons. Logan did the math. 31 people in 72 hours was achievable if the access was clean and the cooperation was genuine. Set it up, he said. Start with whoever has the highest level of access to the offensive planning data. Work down from there. He cleared 28 of them in the first 36 hours. It was grinding, methodical work. Interview rooms, corridor conversations, manufactured proximity in the station's common areas. He developed a system, brief direct interaction, close enough for reliable olfactory reading, a few minutes of sustained contact to let the biochemical picture stabilize. Most people read clean, their biochemistry telling the complicated true story of human and humanoid existence. Stress and caffeine and interrupted sleep and the specific chemical signature of people carrying the weight of a war they weren't sure they were winning. Officer 29 was a Balian logistics commander named Helm who coordinated supply routing for the entire Spinward front and had clearance to every piece of tactical data the Dominion would need to time the Calandra offensive perfectly. Logan sat across from him in a briefing room, ostensibly reviewing supply chain protocols, and spent 4 minutes reading him. Helm was nervous. Genuinely nervous, the real cortisol spike of a real person under real pressure. He read clean. Officer 30 was a human admiral's aide named Cavett, and she read clean. Officer 31 was Admiral Simons himself. Logan had been in the same room as Simons twice during the previous 36 hours, a briefing, a corridor exchange. And both times something had registered as slightly off, a wrongness he had catalogued and set aside as potentially stress-related, the biochemistry of a man carrying enormous responsibility. Command-level stress could produce unusual hormonal profiles. He had wanted more data before making a call he couldn't take back. He got it in the operations center, standing 3 feet from the Admiral during a tactical review, letting the reading stabilize over 8 full minutes. The flatness was there. Underneath the carefully constructed stress response, which was good, the best he had encountered, a founder that had been doing this long enough to understand that emotional authenticity was as important as physical mimicry. The underlying signature ran with that telltale consistency. Too perfect. Too controlled. Logan looked at Sisko across the room. One small nod. What happened next was not clean. The founder wearing Simons had been doing this long enough to read the room, and it read Logan's nod correctly and made its decision in the same instant Sisko made his. It dropped the disguise and moved. Not toward the exit but toward the operations console, toward the tactical system with its direct uplink to every Federation and Allied vessel in the sector. Logan crossed the operations center in 2 seconds and hit the founder at a full run, driving it away from the console with the impact of a man whose bones were made of the hardest substance his world had ever produced. They went into the far bulkhead together, and the founder's form collapsed and reformed around him, trying to envelop, to absorb, to incapacitate through mass and fluidity rather than strength. Logan drove the claws in. Not to wound, to anchor. Pinning the founder's reforming mass against the bulkhead long enough for Odo, DS9's own changeling security chief, to hit it with a containment field from the secondary panel. The amber form went still inside the blue light. Sisko was already on the comm. This is Captain Sisko. All stations, Priority 1. Admiral Simons has been compromised. Lock down all tactical uplinks immediately. Authorization Cisco 77 Echo. The operations center was very quiet for a moment. Logan stood with his back to the contained founder, breathing steadily, retracting his claws. His knuckles healed in the silence. Odo watched him with the particular expression of a changeling looking at someone who had just done something to one of his own kind, and the complexity in that expression was considerable, not hostility, not gratitude, something more ambiguous and more honest than either. The offensive, Kira said. If Simons was feeding them timing data. They don't have it, Logan said. The lockdown happened before it transmitted. He looked at Sisko. Probably. Probably, Sisko repeated. Best I can give you, Logan said. Nothing's certain in a war. Sisko held his gaze for a moment, then turned to his crew with the quiet authority of a man who had learned to work with uncertainty because certainty was a luxury the Dominion War didn't offer. Get me Admiral Ross, he said. And somebody find out where the real Simons is. The real Admiral Simons was recovered from a Dominion holding facility in the Torah system 48 hours later, alive and debriefed within an inch of his sanity by Starfleet intelligence officers who needed to know exactly how much the Founder had extracted from him during the replacement period. The answer was considerable. The damage assessment took weeks. The recriminations took longer. The Calandra offensive came anyway. It came 18 hours after the Operations Center containment, launched on a timeline the Dominion had apparently pre-committed to regardless of whether the Simons infiltrator successfully transmitted its final data package. 300 Dominion vessels crossing the border in a coordinated push that hit the 7th Fleet like a fist through paper. The battle was brutal and costly and ultimately inconclusive. The Federation lines bent but didn't break, Martok's battle group arriving at the critical moment with the timing that Klingon generals either planned meticulously or claimed they had planned meticulously after the fact. Logan watched the battle from Deep Space Nine's Operations Center, tracking it on sensors, useful for nothing because the fight was happening light years away and his particular capabilities had no application at that range. It was a specific kind of frustration he recognized. The feeling of being exactly the wrong tool for the current problem. He had spent his life as a weapon of close range, and this war had dimensions that his claws couldn't reach. When the battle reports came in he read the casualty numbers and said nothing. Sisko found him on the upper level of the promenade late that night, sitting at the viewport that looked out toward the wormhole. The station had quieted to its nighttime rhythms. Lower foot traffic, softer lighting, the promenade's daytime commerce reduced to a few late establishments. The wormhole sat in the distance, dormant and patient, its blue-white geometry occasionally pulsing. With the passage of some vessel or phenomenon within. Sisko sat beside him without preamble. They were quiet for a while. The Calandra line held, Sisko said eventually. I know. The intelligence assessment says the loss of 3 embedded founders, including Simons, degraded the offensive coordination enough to cost them the element of surprise on 2 of the 4 attack vectors. The battle could have gone considerably worse. Logan said nothing. That's not a small thing, Sisko said. People are alive tonight who would not be if those founders had remained in place. Logan looked at the wormhole. It pulsed once, softly, like a breath. I know, he said again. Doesn't make the ones who didn't make it any less dead. Sisko accepted this without argument. It was the kind of truth that didn't need reframing. No, he said. It doesn't. The station hummed around them with its layered mechanical breathing. Life support, gravity plating, the endless systemic maintenance of a structure built to sustain 50,000 lives simultaneously. Logan had been here long enough now to know its specific sounds, the way you learned the sounds of any place you inhabited long enough. He wasn't sure how he felt about that. I've been talking to your science teams, Logan said. About the rift. Sisko looked at him. The subspace event that brought me through. They think it was a consequence of a specific Dominion weapons test in the Badlands. A compound effect between their energy output and a pre-existing dimensional instability in that region. He paused. They think if the conditions were replicated under controlled circumstances, a return passage might be possible. Might be, Sisko said carefully. Might be, Logan agreed. It's not certain. The variables are significant. And the Dominion isn't going to cooperate with the experiment. A pause. But it's not nothing. Sisko was quiet for a moment, looking at the same stars. How do you feel about that? The possibility of going back. It was a simple question carrying considerable weight. Logan turned it over honestly, the way he had been turning it over since Dax's science team had presented their preliminary findings that morning. In his own world there was a war too, there was always a war, had always been a war, would always be another one forming behind the last one. There were people he was responsible for, students at a school in Westchester who deserved to have their teachers come home, teammates who covered his back the way he covered theirs. There was unfinished business of the kind that accumulated over 150 years into a weight that could bend structural metal. And here there was this. A war he hadn't chosen and a people he hadn't known 3 weeks ago who were fighting it with everything they had, with principles they were trying to hold on to even when holding on cost them blood. He had met Kira, who had spent her childhood in a resistance that made his own history look straightforward. He had drunk with Martok and recognized in him the specific loneliness of warriors who had been fighting so long that peace had become theoretical. He had watched Sisko carry the weight of a war and a station and a prophecy and a dead wife with a quiet endurance that Logan understood better than he would ever say out loud. I feel like it's complicated, Logan said. Sisko nodded slowly. It usually is. I'm not done here, Logan said. It came out simply, with the directness of a decision already made. There are installations that haven't been swept. Fleet elements operating blind. If your science team needs time to develop the return protocol, I'm not going to sit on this station watching the war happen through a viewport. He looked at Sisko. Point me somewhere useful. Sisko looked at him for a long moment, this man from another universe, another reality, another war, sitting in the amber light of a space station at the edge of a wormhole with the patience of someone who had learned that the only direction worth moving was forward. I know exactly where to send you, Sisko said. He pulled out a PADD and set it on the ledge between them. Logan picked it up and read the tactical summary displayed on its screen. A forward operating base near the Cardassian border, 3 weeks of anomalous personnel behavior reported, Starfleet intelligence flagging potential infiltration of the command staff, no reliable detection capability on site. Logan set the PADD down. When do I leave? He said. Tomorrow morning, Sisko said. I'll have Kira arrange transport. Logan nodded. Outside the viewport the wormhole pulsed again, that slow blue breath, and the stars held their ancient positions around it with the indifference of things that had watched civilizations rise and fall and would watch this one too, whatever the outcome. He thought about home. He thought about here. He picked up the PADD again and started reading the mission brief. The Dominion War did not end because of Logan. It ended the way most wars end, through exhaustion and sacrifice and the slow accumulation of moments where individuals chose something harder than survival. The signing of the Treaty of Badlands came after months of grinding attrition, after the Cardassian people turned against the Dominion, after sacrifices that the Federation would spend generations memorializing. But in the margins of that history, in the intelligence reports and tactical assessments and the personal logs of officers who had served on the front lines, there were references to an anomalous asset. Unranked, unaffiliated, operating under Sisko's direct authorization across 17 installations in 4 months. The reports noted an unusual detection capability, an unconventional operational style, and a confirmed disruption of 11 changeling infiltrations at command level. Infiltrations that, left undiscovered, would have cost the Federation and its allies dearly at critical moments in the war's final arc. The asset was never formally identified in Starfleet records. Sisko made sure of that. Logan's return passage opened 6 months after his arrival, in the Badlands, under conditions that Dax's science team had spent every available hour engineering. He went through it the way he had come. Without ceremony, without a speech, with a single look back at Sisko standing on the Defiance transporter pad. The war had changed him in the small ways that wars change people who are already too changed to be changed fundamentally. He carried new dead in the place where he kept the dead. He carried the specific knowledge of what it looked like when people chose principle over pragmatism at enormous cost and held the line anyway. He carried that back with him into his own world, where another war was already waiting. Some things, across every universe, stay exactly the same. Live long and prosper. More stories await.